a quick introduction here this morning to the presentation. So Jennifer, if you could advance the slides. Let's talk about some meeting details. First of all, keep in mind that the map talks will be recorded. So once we finish the presentation today, the map talk will be available on the map dashboard website, so you can view it at any time. We're also going to conduct the webinar in conference mode, and that means that everyone except the presenter is going to be muted. Now, if you'd like to ask a question, there will be time at the end of the webinar for that. And you can also send an email anytime to me at ghammond@eller.arizona.edu. So next slide, please. One thing you want to keep in mind about the dashboard is that it's community sponsored. And we want to be sure and thank our sustaining sponsors, Tucson Electric Power, the Thomas R. Brown Foundation, and the Freeport McMoran Foundation. And of course, we want to acknowledge our partners, the Community Foundation for Southern Arizona, the Pima Association of Governments, the Southern Arizona Leadership Council, Sun Corridor, and of course the University of Arizona. Okay, next slide, please. I also want to let you know about some exciting news here on the dashboard project. The dashboard has previously received national, state, and local recognition. But just last fall, the dashboard won an international award. In fact, the dashboard won the 2018 Impact Award from the Community Indicators Consortium, and this is a global outfit. So the dashboard has now received international recognition, so we're really proud of that, and we hope you feel good about it too. We're really happy with how the dashboard project is proceeding. So next slide, please. And we also want to make sure that you know about the map dashboard features, which appear monthly in the Arizona Daily Star. On the front page of the business section, you'll find the Tucson Economy Scorecard, and that will feature a fuel gauge from the dashboard, as well as some of the latest monthly data and a little bit of explanation about what the fuel gauge tells us. The dashboard is also featured in the health section of the Arizona Daily Star once a month, so be sure to check that out as well. And we're really happy about this partnership with the Arizona Daily Star. Okay, next slide. So the presentation that you're going to hear this morning is based on a feature article, and we do feature articles roughly twice per month. And these cover a wide variety of topics, and you see some of the topics here. They range from rental affordability to housing affordability to house prices. We've talked about Arizona's role in border trade. We also have a nice new feature on how individuals and groups in the community are using the map dashboard to measure progress and inspire action. So be sure and check out those feature articles. They're really a cool part of what we do as part of the dashboard project. Okay, next slide. And finally, be sure to engage with us. The dashboard is designed to be very interactive. We want you to tell us what you think about what we have up on the dashboard and let us know how we can help you understand better what's going on in Southern Arizona. There are a couple of ways that you can engage with us. One is to subscribe for updates. This will allow you to subscribe to our roughly a monthly email that we let you know about the latest things that are happening on the dashboard. So be sure and do that. You can also ask a researcher, and that will generate a little form that you can fill out to ask us a question, and then we'll have one of the researchers here in the center get back to you within 24 to 48 hours. So be sure and take advantage of the various ways that we have for you to engage with us. And of course, you can also engage with us on Facebook and Twitter. Okay, next slide, please. And that concludes my role in the presentation. Now I'm going to turn it over to Jennifer Pullen, our excellent map dashboard coordinator. And she is going to take you through the remainder of the map talk. So Jennifer, it's all yours.
Great, thank you, George. It's great to be here with you today. And I thought I want to mention at the beginning here that I apologize if I need to mute myself. I'm getting over a cold and I have a little bit of a cough. So if I go silent for a couple seconds or maybe a minute, just hold tight, I'll be back. And but I thought we'd start out today's webinar with a discussion of a recent feature article that we published on the map dashboard that looks at road miles in Tucson and how the driving patterns of individuals in the Tucson urban area compared to other urban areas around the Western US. And then we'll move into one of our core indicators, transportation to work, to look at different commuting patterns and how individuals in our community get to work. And then I'll briefly highlight an upcoming infrastructure article that you'll see early next year. And then if time allows at the end, we'll navigate the website and I'll show you where to find all of the infrastructure articles and other types of articles on the map dashboard, as well as how to use some of our comparison graphs that you'll see here. So this recent article that we published on the map dashboard called Putting Miles on Our Cars, How Tucson Stacks Up, looks at data from the Federal Highway Administration to explore driving patterns on different road types in Tucson. We can use this data to determine how far the average driver drives in a day, as well as determining which roads in our area get the most use. We're going to explore 4 different road types in this article. We're going to look at interstates, so I-10, and then other freeways and expressways. So for the Tucson urban area, that would be Aviation Highway. Also, other principal arterials. These are roads like Grant Road, Broadway Boulevard, River, and then minor arterials. So those roads include roads like Tucson Boulevard and Pima Street. And so we put a lot of focus in this article on 2 of those road types, other principal arterials and minor arterials, because those 2 road types make up almost 75% of the volume of vehicle miles traveled daily in the Tucson urban area. You can see here that Tucson, in terms of relative to the 11 urban areas that we compare Tucson to, has the highest percentage of volume on other principal arterials and minor arterials when compared to other places like Albuquerque, Phoenix, Las Vegas, San Antonio, Denver. And that's about an even split. 36% of those miles are on other principal arterials and 37% are on minor arterials. So a couple things that are really worth noting here, looking at like Phoenix, it has a pretty small percentage of volume of daily vehicle miles traveled on other principal arterials, but it has a large percentage of that volume on minor arterials, making up, close to here 40% of their daily vehicle miles traveled between other principal arterials and minor arterials on those minor arterials. You see San Diego down there at the bottom at just over 30% of their daily vehicle miles travel. They're on other principal arterials and minor arterial type surface streets. So what that tells us is that a large majority of their miles are on interstates and other freeways. And we can see that here in the next graph, with San Diego at the top having about 64% of their miles are on interstates and other freeways and expressways. They have the largest volume of traffic on interstates amongst these 11 other metropolitan areas, actually tied with Salt Lake City at about 48% percent there is the percentage of their total volume of traffic across those 4 different roadways. So when we're looking at these percentages and these totals, we're looking at just travel on interstates, freeways, and other types of expressways, other principal arterials, and minor arterials. We're not including travel on neighborhood roads or kind of those small connector roads that exist in urban areas as well. So we're just looking at these 4 major types and then distributing the total miles amongst those 4 types. So here you have about 48% in San Diego on interstates. And then if you go down, you see that Salt Lake City, that's also about 48% of their miles on interstates, but they have a very small percentage of their miles on other freeways and expressways. You can see also down at the bottom, Albuquerque does not have any other freeways and expressways to report data for. And then Tucson at the very bottom, you see about 24% of our miles are on interstates and freeways, and then 2.1% on other freeways and expressways. So 2.1% of the daily vehicle miles traveled in the Tucson urban area are on Aviation Highway. That's the only other freeway and expressway that's included in this data. Phoenix, if you look at Phoenix just a couple spots up from Tucson, you can see the interstates here. It's pretty low. It's at 15%, approximately 15%. And then they have a very large volume on other freeways and expressways. And so they actually have the largest volume of any of the urban areas of traffic on other freeways and expressways, much larger than Tucson or Salt Lake City or any of the other urban areas. And this is because Phoenix urban area has several freeways and expressways that exist outside of I-10 or I-17. So now we'll explore this data in a little bit different way. And this is looking at the interstates, the other freeways and expressways, other principal arterials and minor arterials on one graph and comparing across the 12 metropolitan areas. So similar data, same data that we were just looking at earlier, just displayed in a different way. And here it's really easy to see how Tucson compares to Phoenix in other freeways and expressways, with Phoenix having that largest volume and Tucson one of the smallest. Only Albuquerque has a less volume of traffic on other freeways and expressways. And then likewise, you can see the other principal arterials here at 36% in Tucson, substantially higher than the Phoenix area. So as with all of our graphs and charts on the map dashboard, all of these grayed out geographies that you see here below the graph have data. If you were to click on that geography, the graph would regenerate and it would show you the columns of data that are associated with these particular geographies. And likewise, this tooltip that I have here is available for every single one of the columns. If you hover over the columns when you're on the website, that tooltip will appear displaying that actual data point. So I've regenerated this graph. I've clicked off Phoenix and clicked on Salt Lake City and San Antonio so we can look at how this graph looks different when we compare to other geographies. So here I've chosen Salt Lake City and San Diego because they have the largest volume of interstate traffic daily at 46%, substantially lower than Tucson. And again here, that low percentage for other freeways and expressways in Tucson, and that large percentage of both other principal arterials and minor arterials. And you can look at how those compare to both Salt Lake City and San Diego. And so another way that we look at this data is we take the data and we scale it by population. So we can get a per capita measure. We can get a measure of how much people are driving on different road types every single day. So here we have vehicle miles traveled per capita across all the road types. So this includes the volume of traffic on interstates, other freeways and expressways, principal arterials and minor arterials. And that number comes out to 21.3 for Tucson. That means that in Tucson, a person drives 21.3 miles per day on average. Tucson ranks kind of in the bottom half amongst the 11 metropolitan areas. You see San Antonio up here at the top at 24.3, Portland down here at the bottom at 18.4. So here you see a drop-down menu. And if you were to click on this, and in a few minutes when we go to the live website, I'll show you this on the website. If you click on this and you'll be able to explore the per capita rates for not just the total, but for all of the 4 major road types as well. So you can look at how many miles per day are being driven on interstates, on other freeways and expressways, principal arterials, and then minor arterials. And we'll take a look at that in a few minutes. The vehicle miles travel data is important because it can help shape transportation planning and the distribution of public dollars. It also, total vehicle miles traveled can be tracked over time. And so this allows us to expose changes in driving patterns to see if there's shifts from one road type to another road type over time. And then also allows for the potential to project future congestion levels in an urban area. So tracking this data over time and exploring the different volumes of different volume of traffic on roadways allows us to better finance our roadways in terms of where the money is going, and then also to project for potential future congestion on different road types. So now we looked at that last graph and we saw that Tucson had kind of in the bottom half in terms of per capita on total roadways, are those 4 major roadways that we look at in Tucson. And there's several reasons behind why Tucson's per capita rate is a little bit lower than some of the other metropolitan areas, just like we saw Portland down there at the bottom, and we'll talk about Portland in a little bit more detail in a minute. But one of those reasons could be because both Portland and Tucson, you see, has a high percentage of those that commute to work by bicycle, at least a high percentage relative to the U.S. or the rest of the western urban areas that we explore. Tucson at 1.8% of residents that bike to work is 3 times higher than the U.S., substantially higher than many of our pure metropolitan areas, and a little bit behind Portland, which is up there at 2.4%. This fuel gauge is available in the article, Putting Miles on Our Cars, How Tucson Stacks Up. This information is also available in our core indicator called Transportation to Work. So as George mentioned earlier, we publish 2 feature articles each month, approximately 2 each month, but we also have 36 different core indicators that we update annually on the MAP dashboard. And one of those core indicators is called Transportation to Work, and it looks at how residents get to work as well as how long our commute times are in our different metropolitan areas that we explore on the MAP dashboard. So we're going to now switch gears and take a look at some of that commuting data in our Transportation to Work. On each of our core indicators, you're going to find a summary page, and the summary page is going to provide you with information about what that core indicator means, why it's important, why we should track it, and then it has a long-term trend information with it as well. And so we can look at how different commuting patterns are changing over time in the Tucson metropolitan area versus other metropolitan areas. And here you see I've highlighted carpooling, and we can see Tucson falls right about in the middle of the other metropolitan areas at 10%, substantially down from 2009 when it was almost at 12%. And so carpooling has declined in the Tucson metropolitan area since 2009. Salt Lake City up here is the highest at 11.8, Denver the lowest at 8.4, and the US there at 9.2%. So if you go to that summary page for Transportation to Work, you're going to find this kind of information, how Tucson stacks up relative to those other metropolitan areas in the western US that we are similar to. These metropolitan areas are similar to Tucson in some way. Many of them have a similar level of population or similar demographic mix, a large research university, or a large military installation. And these metropolitan areas are consistent across all 36 of our core indicators. And we also try to explore these 12 metropolitan areas in our feature articles as well. But you will note that it's important to note that the information that we're looking at in the Vehicle Miles Traveled article explores urban areas, whereas our core indicators explore metropolitan areas. So urban areas tend to be a little bit smaller. They're continuous population in those regions, and then our metropolitan areas are defined at the county level, so they tend to be a little bit bigger than an urban area. Now, if we are exploring our core indicator, Transportation to Work, and we've read all of the summary information, which compares Tucson to those 11 other metropolitan areas and then looks at how Tucson does compared to the US and to the state of Arizona, we can then click on our comparison tab that you'll see at the top of the transportation to work page, and you can get the data for all of the core geographies that we explore on the map dashboard. So we look at not just those 12 metropolitan areas, but we always benchmark back to the US. We have information for the state of Arizona, as well as 9 other western states, and then we have information available for the 15 Arizona counties. So in this graph, we can look at all of the different modes of transportation to work, excluding driving alone, which is the majority of most individuals drive alone to work, and that's up in the high 70s for most of our urban areas, or for most of our metropolitan areas. But here I've chosen to look at the other modes of transportation to work, excluding drove alone. The first is carpooling, public transportation, walking, biking, other, which includes using a taxi cab or Uber or a moped to get to work. And then the last one is work from home. And I chose Portland to compare Tucson to because Portland had the lowest per capita rate of vehicle miles traveled in our article. So I wanted to see how Tucson and Portland compared across these different modes of transportation to work. And we can see that, as we saw from our fuel gauge, that Portland has a slightly higher percentage of those that bike to work, so a little bit higher for Portland here. But they also have a higher percentage of those that are walking to work, and they have a much higher percentage of those that are using public transportation to get to work. So Tucson's just over 2.5%, whereas Portland is at 6.5%. So I encourage you to come and visit this indicator. You can explore the other metropolitan areas that we have, or the counties if you're interested in Arizona counties or states, across these different measures. And in a minute, I'm going to show you just real briefly how to access this data and how to use these interactive graphs. But before I do that, I wanted to mention an upcoming article that we have on travel delay. So this will be available in probably late January, maybe early February on the map dashboard. And this article is going to explore the travel delay or congestion data. You can see here the graph. You can see Tucson. This is annual delay hours per auto commuter. So at Tucson, that's just over 45 hours. Travel delay may be caused by weather, traffic accidents, road construction. And this article is going to explore the long-term trend and cost of congestion. So stay tuned for that article. Look for it early next year. If you haven't, George mentioned our newsletter. Sign up for our newsletter. We'll publish when this article is available in the newsletter, and we'll also post it on Twitter. If you are on social media, I encourage you to follow us on Twitter. So I'm going to now switch over here and go to the website real quick so we can look at really quickly where to find the different infrastructure core indicators or education or economy or whatever you're interested in exploring on the map dashboard, where to find our old articles that we've written, and then how to use those comparison graphs. So first you have your core, your 6 categories listed across the top here. Here's infrastructure. If you hover over that, you'll see the 6 core indicators that we include with transportation to work listed at the bottom. You'll click on that. It will take you to the indicator, but real quick before we do that, this is where you find recent feature articles and the spotlight that George had mentioned, the community spotlight. If you scroll down a little bit more, you'll find that most recent feature article that we just discussed today, putting miles on our cars. If we click on that, it will take you to the article. And here's some of the graphs that we looked at today. But if we scroll down just a little bit, here's that graph where I just had Phoenix and Tucson. You can have all of the geographies clicked on if you want, or you can just click off and look at the geographies you're interested in, and then hover over those columns and the value will appear for each of those different roadway types. But if we scroll down just a little bit more, here's where I was mentioning that we have these graphs for all 4 major road types. So if we wanted to look at other principal arterials, we could click on that, and we have vehicle miles traveled per capita on other principal arterials, and we can hover over Tucson and see that that's 5.8. So every day, individuals drive 5.8 miles on average in the Tucson area on other principal arterials. So you can play around with this data, see how we compare across the different roadway types. And here, Tucson up here at the top in terms of minor arterials. We have a large percentage of minor arterials relative to other regions. And so there's more information in here on the article. I encourage you to check that out. But we'll go in and look at, real quick here, the infrastructure core indicator transportation to work. Excuse me. So here's the summary page where you're going to find all of the context behind what this means. Excuse me for just a moment. So here's all the summary information, how Tucson compares to the US and the state. But then if we go to this link right here on comparison, you'll find that interactive graph that I talked about where I had just clicked on Tucson and Portland, but we could compare Tucson to Phoenix or Tucson to Las Vegas across all of these different modes of transportation, as well as exploring the drove alone trend over time here. So now I'm going to open it up to questions. I'm going to unmute everybody. If there's any questions, you can chime in now. You can ask them, or you're always welcome to send us an email. Well, thank you for your time today. If there's no questions, then we will end the webinar. And if you have a question in the future, please feel free to reach out to George or I, and we'll respond to your question. We'll post this webinar on the website later today. If you're interested in sharing it with your colleagues, we encourage you to do that. Thank you so much for attending. Bye-bye.